Hey everyone, welcome to Two Car Pros. My name is Ryan, and today we will be continuing our how to build a Ford 5.4 liter 3-valve engine. If you missed our previous videos, it is linked down below in the description. I have a whole playlist here on YouTube that shows you exactly how to take apart your Ford 5.4 liter 3-valve engine and put it all back together so you have a nice running truck. In today's video, we're focusing on putting on the exhaust manifolds and the front accessories. A small step, but a very crucial one. Before we get started, let's go ahead and thank our amazing sponsor, Summit Racing. Summit Racing has built 4 engines with us now, which is just absolutely amazing. They're an incredible sponsor, and I've been using Summit Racing for decades. They have amazing customer support, incredible selection, and really easy returns if you goof and order something incorrectly. So make sure you buy all your speed parts from summitracing.com. With all that out of the way, let's jump in. So now that our exhaust studs are in, let's go ahead and talk about our exhaust manifold. Since this is a stock rebuild, we're not going with like super long tube headers or something fun and crazy like that. I'm just gonna reuse my old units. I rebuilt these myself, and all that comprised of was getting the rust off of them, putting a little bit of rust converting compound on here and spraying it with some black header paint, and I think it turned out pretty snazzy, especially for a stock rebuild. I've already cleaned off this mating surface on both of my headers here, and then I also want to talk about our gaskets. They are made by Molle, and as far as I'm aware, right this moment, they are the only ones that make this type of kind of OEM style gasket. You might be able to get them straight from the dealer, but I don't want to pay dealer prices. This is a metal multi-layered gasket. See, it has 2 layers on there instead of just one. They make ones that are just like a composite one-piece gasket. I haven't had a ton of luck with those lasting and going the distance, but these metal ones always hit the nail on the head, and they are my preferred part for putting on manifolds or headers or anything like that. I much prefer the metal ones, so the link down below in the description for these guys for you. So let's go ahead and install them. So now we can remove our tape over our exhaust ports, being very careful not to drop anything down in there. It's kind of the whole point of the tape. And then we can clean this area off with some carburetor spray. I already did that before I put the tape on, so the tape would stick, so I know it's still clean. And what I'm going to do is take some high temp RTV. A lot of people are going to disagree with me on this, and that's okay. You can go ahead and not put the RTV on there, but I like to give it a little bit of help. So what I do is just put a little bit on the end of my finger, and then just go around the exhaust port, and just a skin, just a little bit, because it's a real bummer to have an exhaust leak. So just go ahead and put a nice skin all the way around each of the exhaust ports, and I will leave a link down below in the description to this exact RTV I'm using. I got it on Amazon, and I actually really like the stuff. No, I'm not sponsored. It's just a good product. There we go. Make sure they all look like that. So now that our exhaust ports are all RTV'd up, again, not a lot, just a light skin, we're going to take our gaskets here and put them on like this. You know, so it's kind of like a D shape pointing up this way. We can match it up to our exhaust ports. And we're just going to slink that down just like that. Go ahead and grab the other one. An easy way to tell is the writing on these ones will be, you know, straight up. It's where you can read them. And just slink them all the way down. That looks awesome. I'm going to go ahead and grab our exhaust manifold, and I've already given that the same treatment with our RTV thin skin. And we're just going to line it up, make sure we got it on right, which it is. And they are side specific, you can't mix them up like that. And then grab one of our fancy pants stainless steel fasteners here and just put that on, just put the rest of the fasteners on. So now what I'm going to do is take my 13mm socket and just bring this down a little bit. So we're just going to kind of go on an X. And I'm just bringing it down. Always moving across the manifold. There we go. Now I can grab my torque wrench, and I'm going to set this to the factory spec, which is 18 foot-pounds. And we can, again, just repeat our X pattern. It's going to loosen. See, my torque wrench didn't go off yet. I'm just trying to do this as evenly as I can. Because you got to remember, it's like a really big piece of cast iron onto aluminum. See why I wanted the RTV? This is basically why. And it's crushing that gasket. Actually, I'm going to start here. There we go. Now it's starting to go down. And we're getting to spec. So just keep going on X's across the manifold until your torque wrench goes off, like mine has on 18 foot-pounds. And I'm just going to check them all again, just to make sure. And there we go, installed, and go ahead and do the same thing for the driver's side. So now let's worry about putting on our front accessories, and the first one I'm going to start with is our water pump, because this can actually go on the engine before it goes in the truck. I think the alternator has to go on while it's in the truck, so we'll cross that bridge later, but I wanted to show you the one I got. This one I got just from Rock Auto. You can get these from your dealer as well. These are the actual like Motorcraft Ford unit. I much prefer to go with a OEM unit by Motorcraft or maybe AC Delco. I wouldn't go with one of the other aftermarket offerings because I think these work better and I've had way better luck with them. You know, not locking up or, you know, end up weeping out of the hole here, you know, 10,000 miles down the road. I want this thing to last like 150,000 miles. So you get the OEM one and it's not that much more money and there was no core deposit or anything. And check it out. It just looks like $1 million freaking dollars. And make sure it has the seal on here. I think our gasket kit came with a new seal, but there's already one pre-installed, so it is ready to go. And I have our bolts from when we took the old one out, so we can go ahead and put this on our engine. So next thing I'm going to do, and some of you are going to disagree with me on this, and that's okay, is I'm going to take some black RTV and I'm going to put it on the inside here where the water pump sits and the O-ring interacts with the block. You never put an O-ring on dry anyway, so if you don't use RTV, I would use WD-40 around the seal on the water pump, but the RTV is going to act as a lubricant and sealant once it's dry. So I'm just going to put a thin skin all the way around. You'll see the little groove that the water pump seal wants to sit in, and you just put a little thin film in there. Not a lot. You're not like laying down a giant bead or something. Just a little bit. Just give it a little help, a little lubrication, and trust me, you are going to be very happy you did it, because then you don't have to take the water pump back off and deal with a subsequent leak. So just do it. But if not, that's okay too. Just use WD-40 to lubricate that seal up and hope the seal is enough to do its job. So what I'm going to do is take our water pump, making sure our seal is nice and in its home, which it is, orientate it correctly with our bolt holes like this. So once we're sure all the bolt holes are going to line up, we can just kind of, and it's kind of a tight fit. That's why you want the RTV on there or the WD-40, because you'll get a little bit of lubrication on there and it'll make sure that the seal isn't torn or something like that. So making sure that that is on like that. There we go. That's much better. And there's 4 in total. And then what I'm going to do is just get my impact wrench here, and I'm just going to bring them down to touch in a cross pattern. And then the torque specification for this is 20. So it's 20 foot-pounds. And again, we can just kind of start on a cross pattern here. There we go. Water pump installed. So now we can replace our water pump pulley. This is just the stock pulley that I took off. All I've done is taped it off for the serpentine belt to ride on, and shot with some gloss enamel. Really easy. What we can do is just put that on, hold the back of it until the bolts line up. These are the wrong bolts. So this is the right bolt. I make mistakes too, guys. Still 10 millimeter head. I'm just going to get them started on the cross here on the X, just because I want it to sit down nice and flush and make sure that I can still get all 4 bolts in. Yeah, it looks pretty good. And I'm keeping the thread protector on the water pump until I put the fan on. And I'm just going to bring them down to touch. Ooh, careful. Cool. So in order to torque these down to the 19 foot-pounds that's required, I'm going to take a standard screwdriver, a fairly beefy one, and just kind of use it to hold the pulley as I tighten. Make sure it doesn't slip. There we go. And then just cross the X. There we go. Go next door. And then this one's the last one I have to do. And there we go, the pulley's nice and installed using just a screwdriver. So next we are going to talk about our pulley system, and that comprises of 2 smooth pulleys, 1 6-rib pulley, and 1 tensioner. And I've gotten all the OEM replacement parts. This is the part number for our smooth pulleys, and this is the replacement part for our ribbed. And yes, it's AC Delco, it's okay, you can put GM stuff on a Ford, it'll be fine. That's just a really good reputable parts house and made in Canada, not somewhere questionable. Same with the tensioner, and there is the part number for that as well. And I will leave links down below in the description to all these because I purchased these myself, and I didn't go with the knockoff options. I went with the original parts because I want them to work really well. And one of these pulleys is bad, and I figured, you know what, if one of them's bad, they're all going bad soon, so I'm just going to replace them. They're not terribly expensive, and they're absolutely worth it. So let's go ahead and get started putting these on. So I'm going to go ahead and grab our grooved pulley, making sure the Made in Canada text is pointing towards us, or if you don't have that, just make sure the shallow side is pointing us. See how that's a little more deep? You want the deep side towards the engine, like that. And I'm just going to get this bolt started, and then I'm going to grab our smooth one, again, text to me, just get it started. And then our other one, our other smooth one, goes right here. It's actually better if you put the pulley on kind of first and then start the bolt like that. That looks nice. And then I'm going to grab a 13mm socket and just snug them down for right now. And the torque spec for this is 18 foot-pounds. So go ahead and torque them down. And if you don't have a torque spec, it's perfectly fine. Just 1 arm tight is acceptable. Make sure they spin nice like that. Ooh. Oh, that's going to be so much better. So now we can put on our tensioner, and it only goes on the one way with kind of the triangle pointing up. So just put it on, get the bolts started. Do it for the other 2 as well. And then these are 10mm bolts, and I'm just going to bring them down to touch. And then hilariously enough, the torque spec for this is also 18 foot-pounds, so just going across like this. Tensioner installed. So let's go ahead and talk about our sensors. Here's our crank trigger sensor and our 2 camshaft sensors. Now the camshaft sensors are the same. There's only 1 part number for this. You just buy it twice. And truthfully, between you and me, if these were working when you took them out of your engine, they're probably fine. And not to mention, they're really easy to get to and deal with. So it's not that big a deal if you do have to release those a little bit down the road. So if that's a cost you want to defer, I could support that. But I went ahead and just got the new ones. Here's the cam trigger, and here's the crank trigger. And links to these parts will be located down below in the description, so let's grab our old bolts and get to installing them. So on this O-ring, the only thing protecting you from an oil leak, basically, is this O-ring. So if it doesn't sit quite right, it's never going to work. And the traditional thing to do is either take some engine oil and put it around there, or some WD-40, and I support that. Very, very good. But what I'm going to do is our old friend RTV, and I know there's a lot of people that are going to disagree with me on this one, and that's okay. We all do things differently for different reasons. Is I'm going to put a little bit on that seal and just spread it around. It's going to give lubrication. It's going to give that seal its best chance of working, and that's just my little tip for you. If you do not like this and don't want to do it, then don't. But this is my tip. I've been doing this a little while, and it just seems to really work well. And you can just push that in, see how nice that was. It went in, the O-ring didn't get all sideways, it's very nice. And then we can grab the 8mm bolt. And I couldn't find a torque spec for you. Wrist tight's probably totally fine, it's only 8mm, and it's going into aluminum, so just about that much. No more, no less. And do the exact same thing for the driver's side, it's exactly the same. So I'm gonna go ahead and install our crank trigger exactly the same way we did our cam, just like that. And again, I don't have a torque spec for you, but you know, wrist tight would be acceptable. There we go. So now let's talk about our power steering system, and what we're going to worry about right now is the pressure line, the new pump, and the pressure switch. So this pressure switch is basically there to up the engine RPM if you're trying to turn while at idle, so it'll help the pump move the fluid better essentially. This is our old unit. I've already removed the pulley off of there. The reason I didn't show you how to do that is because I've already shown how to do that in a lot of other videos, and I think it's kind of repetitive and you need a puller to do it. But the new ones, often, almost all of them actually, except for the Ford Motorcraft product, already have a new pulley installed. You don't even need a pulley to put it on and off, because this design, you don't need to do that. It's kind of cool. But this is the replacement unit. I got this from Ford because I wanted a new unit that wasn't rebuilt or anything like that. So it's a little bit more work on my end, but I am prepared to do that. So here's the new unit. So here is our new rebuilt unit from Ford. This has their warranty and their guarantee and a, number scratched in there so they can tell who did the rebuilding and everything. But it was from Ford OEM, so it doesn't come with the pulley. I'm gonna have to put that on myself, which won't be a big deal. The other thing I would absolutely replace while you are here is the pressure line. The return line, not such a big deal, but this is the pressure line that goes from the pump to the rack, and these do wear out, and they are under a good amount of pressure, so it's a good idea to just replace them while you're here. If you're going to reuse your old one, just blow it out with some compressed air and carburetor spray to make sure there's no unwanteds in there that might potentially ruin your new pump. And what we need to do is remove this little blue plug and put our pressure switch in there. I've already lubricated the O-ring on there with some WD-40. And this doesn't have to be like Omega tight, just gonna do a 14mm wrench. You can't get a flare nut wrench on there, it's too small. And just snug it up like that, perfectly good. Now we can worry about putting our pulley on. So I'm actually just gonna install the power steering pump onto the engine like I normally would on like an LS or a big block or something like that. You don't have to do it that way if you have like a really good way of holding the power steering pump, but I really don't. I couldn't get the angle quite right on the vise or anything, and I don't wanna harm it. And on the bolts, it has 3 that hold it in. So there's 2 normal looking ones on the top, and then this one with the stud kind of sticking out the top. That one goes on the bottom right, if you're looking straight at it. They're 10mm headed. You can just start bringing those down. Don't go all the way all at once. And I could not find a torque spec for these. If I had to guess, it's probably something like 20, 22 pounds or something. I don't know, one arm tight's fine. And you are just bolting into aluminum, so, take that under advisement. Just like that. Awesome. So now what I'm going to do, even before I put the pulley on, is I'm going to remove the plastic plug for the pressure line. Set that aside. Grab our pressure line, and I've already put some WD-40 on the Teflon washer. If yours doesn't have a Teflon washer on it, go ahead and get one. And if you're reusing your old pressure line, go ahead and get a new Teflon washer and put that on, because this Teflon washer is really integral to the system working. It's really important that that Teflon washer is intact. So that is an 18mm size nut, and I'm not tightening it with my open end wrench. All I'm doing with this 18mm is bringing it down to touch. I'm not actually going to tighten with it. That's what my flare nut wrench is for. So the way we can do it is orientate the line away from us, and then the flare nut wrench should be able to kind of fit over the square, and then we should be able to tighten it down. And don't worry about the line actually being like tight. This is always going to be able to twist and move, so don't worry too much about that. What you do need to worry about is over tightening this. Don't go crazy on it, just snug like that is perfectly good. There's really no way to get like a torque wrench or a torque setting on that or anything. Just trust your instincts on that one. So this is the way it should be routed. I kind of had it flip the other way in another take. I'm not sure if that one's going to make it into the shot or not, but I want to mention that it kind of goes like this and around the adapter for the oil filter, and then you just kind of don't bend it too much, but you bend it a little bit. So you just want this bracket on this stud right here, and this is what the routing should look like, and now we can move on. So to install our pulley, and a lot of power steering pumps that aren't the Ford OEM actually already have the pulley installed, and you don't need to deal with this, but mine's not. So I have my snap-on set. No, you don't need the snap-on one. This is like a $400 set. I do this for a living, so it's worth it to me to get the expensive tool. Even just bought it, as you can see. You can just rent these from AutoZone for not a lot of money. So what we need to do is take this adapter, I believe. That will go in the end of our snout. And then we need to make our tool function by putting this on there and lubing up these threads. Take that off. And then the thread's already been lubricated with some of my engine assembly lube. You can use engine oil or even WD-40. I like using the grease, kind of sticks on there really good. And then we're going to take this bit of our tool and put it into these threads right here, making sure that's nice and slinked down. And then we have our installer, so we can go ahead and try to put our pulley on. So a little tip I have for you is our pulley I've left out in the sun for a few hours. It's pretty warm, it's probably about 100 degrees. You could go even hotter if you wanted to. I used to have a little toaster oven just for that reason. And we can just kind of start it on the shaft here. It's not going to go on, obviously, and we need our tool. So I was wrong earlier. I grabbed a little bit thicker installer tool. This one is the 3/8 by 16 adapter. So this one's the small one that should be able to interface with the power steering pump. And we want to hold that as best we can so that way we can get the tool fully inserted into the shank on the power steering pump, making sure that our pulley is nice and perpendicular to that. Our threads are nice and lubricated with some grease. And then what I'm going to do is I have this nice ratcheting wrench that's a 1 inch. You put that on the tool side, and then 1/2 inch on this side, and then oops, what you do is you hold the black part of the tool while you twist the silver part of the tool. And what that's going to do is literally force this onto the shaft. It's pressing this on. All right, that seems nice and installed. Let's go ahead and verify that. Sometimes this happens where the tool will get kind of stuck in there. You can just jiggle it and it should come out like that. And that is basically what you're looking for. So the way you can verify that it's fully installed, on this one it's not quite that way. The snout doesn't actually come to the end of the beveled part, but the snout will be at the very end of where the bevel is dropping in. See that? Right at the end of my fingernail? That's how you know it is properly installed all the way. There's even a second way to verify that. We can take a look at the actual pulleys themselves, because these pulleys all have to be in line with each other. If they're out even just a little bit, the pulley's going to walk the belt off itself. But you can see that it is directly lined up with each other, as all of the grooves line up perfectly. This groove lines up with this groove lines up with this groove, and so on and so forth. You can even grab your serpentine belt and double verify that by putting it on like this. Is the belt completely parallel at the front of the block? And it is, so we know that our pulley is fully installed. So now we can put our mount for our power steering fluid reservoir back on and see that little slot that actually interacts with that stud right up there, and the big bolt hole down here, and this little peg interacts with this right here. So it's a little fiddly, but just keep at it. I know you'll get it. There we go. Oh, that looks nice and snazzy. Now, for this bracket, all I've done is clean it up and then put a little bit of glossy paint on there, and it should be good to go. There we go. That looks really nice. And it's funny, the thing that actually holds it to the head is this big ol' looking goofy bolt. It's 18 millimeter on the head, and it just goes right there. Don't have a torque spec for you, but you know, tight. It's probably good. And I've noticed just a small interaction with the valve cover right here and it. So if you're really worried about that, you can clearance it like I think I'm going to do. So I'm going to cut that off. That'll be off screen. It's kind of a custom thing. It only pertains to this valve cover, as I don't want it bumping against there, making all kinds of noise, and you know, ruining my new valve cover. But that only applies if you have the Ford Racing one. So now we're going to worry about putting on our AC compressor. It's basically the last thing we can put on our engine before it goes back in the truck, or at least for the front accessories. And I bought the Motorcraft original one. It's a little more expensive, but I live in a desert and I really like it when my air conditioning works. So I'm going to go ahead and just buy the Ford OEM one. Feel free to get the, you know, off-brand one. Ooh, look at that. They really want to get your attention. Basically, this is just saying if your AC compressor failed on you and came apart, you're going to have to flush the system, and they're not responsible for you not doing that and it ruining your new AC compressor. But since ours was fine, we took it apart, and I'm replacing it out of a precaution, and I really don't want to take the whole thing back apart after I've already done it. I'm going to go ahead and put the new one in. Oh, that is beautiful. Oh man, that is why I like to spend the money and get the OEM part. That is beautiful. Let's go ahead and put it on. So I know all of you are just on the edges of your seat about the PAG oil when it comes to AC compressors, and I want to show you that, look, you can see it sloshing around in there, and if I turn this very slightly, if I turn the actual compressor part, this bit, you'll be able to see it start bubbling up a little bit. See that? Well, I don't want to turn it too much. I don't want to make it a big mess, and I'm going to put the cover back on it, but I wanted to show that it does actually come with oil pre-installed. And in my experience, if you try to like remove oil and then add oil, it's kind of a whole poop shoot, and you never get it right anyway. A good rule of thumb is if your compressor had oil when you took it out and the new one has oil putting it back in, it's probably fine. If you want to sit there and science out the exact ounces of PAG oil to have in there, be my guest. But in my experience in this situation, it is totally okay to just go ahead and put the new compressor on with the factory installed amount of oil, and you're made in the shade. So this is where our AC compressor goes on the passenger side, low down. And we have these really long 10mm headed bolts. And then just bring them down to touch. Awesome. And if I had to guess on the torque spec, I'd go like 20, but one arm tight is what I'm going to do. Not everything on engines, I mean everything technically is a torque spec, but sometimes they're insanely difficult to find and not super important. You're just going to have to make your best judgment. This is one of those times. There we go. Here, torque. My arm torque wrench is saying 25. Maybe 23. There you go, installed. With all that on our engine, we are just about ready to put it in the truck, so this will probably be the last video with the engine on the stand. The rest of it is probably going to be assembled inside of the vehicle, just the way that Ford has kind of made the truck with the engine. You're going to have to put it in before you put on the intake manifold, and I think it's easier to put on a couple of things when it's in the truck. Actually, I don't even think it's possible to put your intake manifold on outside of the truck and then put it in, just because the opening's not big enough, and it's kind of a tight fit, so it's better to put the intake manifold on once it's inside of the truck, and then once the intake manifold's on, then we can put on the alternator and the coolant crossover bracket and a couple other things. But that is in the next video, so I hope you're subscribed if you found this video interesting or helpful at all. It really helps my channel out. Thank you for watching. Thank you Summit Racing for sponsoring this series, and I'll see you next time.